Welcome, everyone. I wanted to jump on here right quick. We're less than 2 weeks away from opening day. And I live down here in Texas, and I've been hearing a lot down here that I've been hearing it probably for the whole year that Nebraska is their defense is not as good as we think it is. And then I happened to see Sean and Sip's show, and I kind of wanted to talk about that. So I kind of want to play devil's advocate, if you know what I mean. So is the defense really that good? That's the question. And statistically, you would say yes. If you look at last year's stats, then yes, they were. But if you look at the situations last year on who they play, and what I'm going to do also at the end is at the end, I'm after everything that's talked about, I'm going to explain why it might not matter this year. But statistically, Nebraska was top 15, top 10 in a lot of categories. But then you look at situations like that run against Iowa that set them up for the game winning field goal. They couldn't get Wisconsin off the field. They they just moved the ball up and down the field, and it seemed like every time third down. What was their third down? Wisconsin's third down percentage, probably 60%, 60, 70%. And then you go to the Maryland game. Couldn't get Maryland off field. They couldn't stop Maryland when they needed to at the end. They only had 14 takeaways all year. I mean, you look at things like that, and then you wonder, was they really that good? Was the Big Ten West really that bad? I mean, do you think the Big Ten West was that bad? Or do you think Nebraska was really that good? Because you go back 2 years ago, they were pretty bad. And then Tony White came in here in 1 year and made them a top 15 defense. But then again, they were still playing in the Big Ten West, right? So if you want to use the excuse the Big Ten West was bad, or they really bad offensively? Was they bad? Or was they what they typically are every year? So the question is to me, if this defense is that good, let's give it credit and say it is that good. It is a top 15 defense, and we think they're going to improve this year. If that's the case, can they win 9 or 10 games? And I'd say if it is realistically as good as everybody keeps saying it is, then yes. But I have to wonder if when you look at last year's and the teams like take the two teams that really scored on them, Michigan and Colorado at the end of that. And that's probably the two best offenses Nebraska played last year. Then you take the rest. Offensively, they really weren't all that. So is that's the question. Is the Huskers really is that defense really good? Or was the Big Ten West really that bad? And that's kind of what I'm trying to decide because we're all thinking this is the year. We got Dylan Raiola. We're thinking the offense is going to do better, and I do believe the offense do better. But how many times you've seen it where one side struggles, the next year you kind of solve that side, and then the side that wasn't the problem, then you have problems that year. I believe USC was that way last year, where they came in and was supposed to have a decent defense, and then turned around. It kind of went south on them. So I'm trying to decide: are they really that good, or is it just the teams they played were that bad? So, but I know one thing when they discussed it with Tony White the other day, and they were discussing the scrimmages and all that. Tony White already, he brought up about, well, one, I kind of thought it was ironic. He talked about they addressed a lot of tackle because he didn't like the tackling going on. And that was one thing I thought they did better because even if you thought they weren't good, to me, it could be a little of both. Maybe they weren't as good as the statistics show from last year, but they were definitely an improved defense. And I believe you guys will agree with me because if you look at last year, I noticed right off the bat, the one thing between last year and Scott Frost's year is the tackling. They were tackling crisper. They were making clean. Remember, a lot of times during Frost's tenure, it just seemed like a lackluster effort sometimes. There missed tackles left and right. And it almost showed that they didn't practice tackling, and that's kind of a lost art. We practiced tackling all the time back then. Coach Osborne would practice tackling, trust me. And you just don't see that very much. But I think the good teams do that. I bet you Georgia or Alabama and them, Ohio State, they probably practice tackling. You got to practice tackling. It's like anything else. If you don't practice it, you're not going to be good at it. You can't just go out there because mainly when you're coming from high school, most of these kids coming in from high school, they were probably their elite player on the team. So it doesn't take much effort to tackle. And so when you get to the college level like this, well, then you need a better technique. You got to know how to tackle, or you're going to have a lot of missed tackles. So that's one thing I saw last year. I actually thought was improved, and so I think overall they were a better defense. But were they as good as their statistics show? I mean, they have a lot of improvement. Like I said, that Iowa game when they really needed them to stop them, they couldn't stop them. And I don't know if it was just again, another turnover took the air out of them, but that run that set Iowa up, that 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 can't happen. And then you look at Wisconsin. Like I said, every time you turn around, they were in third down. They they completed it. They just couldn't get Wisconsin off the field, and then Maryland. And then you turn around and look at teams like Colorado and Michigan that had. I know Colorado and Nebraska pretty much had them pretty much bagged up through the second half. And I'm over here thinking, and then of course they ended up turning around. Colorado ended up turning around and what did they score 42 or something like that on? And that's basically just in half a half a game because midway, most of the way through that second, they were shut down. They had nothing. So you're thinking, okay, remember Colorado's offensive line wasn't that good last year, and Nebraska sacked Shedeur Sanders 7 or 8 times I know of, and would have had more if he just did a Houdini and get out of there. So again, I go back, was Colorado's offensive line just that bad? And Shedeur finally made plays and turned that game around. And then if you look at the Michigan game, that just went down south on all around, offense, defense. Probably the worst game they played. But then again, you're thinking, was it that bad, or was Michigan that good and Nebraska, even defensive, wasn't as good? Because you could say, yeah, the offense wasn't good, but the offense had a lot of reasons. They had a lot of injuries. They were on their second and third string quarterbacks. And then you were in a Big Ten West that maybe he's not very good offensively, but they definitely were defensively. So was it really much different? But what I want to say that for this year, for 2024, the biggest difference is the weight room. They all hit that weight room. I think Emuellen and Williams, they both stated about having to put more muscle on them. I think Williams talked about he was 20 or 30, I think 30 pounds heavier. I think he said he was 220 last year, maybe it was 230. And now he's about 250. And he talked about in his interview how much effort he had to put in to make a tackle, where like Nash and Ty, being bigger guys and all that, didn't have to put as much effort in to make a tackle coming through there, where he had to put 100%, which means you're going to get wore out, wore down a little quicker. So they concentrate on muscle mass building up over the winter. And he said he added about 20 or 30 pounds, I believe it. I know at least 20. Um, so he's now up to 250, and I know he said that. And then Muella made the same remark about how much harder it was for him, and he's bulked up. And I think you're going to see that throughout the defense. So I think you're going to see improvement no matter what. And honestly, I think you're going to see the kind of the same statistics as you saw last year, or even better. And let me tell you why. If you compare the schedules from last year to this year, there's not really much different. Yes, we were in the Big Ten West last year, and now we're not. But let's break it down. We don't have Minnesota. Okay, we start off with UTEP, which is not as good as Minnesota. We got the same team in Colorado, but they revamped almost their whole team. So are they going to be the same? I know Dion has talked about he loves his defensive line, and it's really going to put Nebraska's offensive line to test in week 2. But he wasn't going to give any remarks about his offensive line, which tells me probably how bad it is because Dion doesn't hold back. Been watching and dealing with Dion since he was in college in the 80s, and he don't hold back. He'll brag, and you guys know it. And with him not saying anything tells you how bad it probably really is. Now, they do have some talent. They got that 5-star, but it's hard for a freshman to start on the offensive line. That's why you don't see Graham Bricks and them starting. You just don't see true freshmen. You might get a redshirt freshman, a good one. If you've got like a David Sanders Jr. or even a Brandon Baker last year, you might be able to put them in there, but it would be hard. And they would be the 2 players like that who are top in the country overall even, but definitely the number 1 offensive tackles in their respective years. There's no doubt they could probably do it as a redshirt freshman or a true sophomore, but it's just hard for it. So I don't expect Colorado's line to do any better than it did last year. It might even do worse because they just revamped that whole thing. And one thing about an offensive line, as you guys know and you've watched over the years, you have to work together. Okay, you got to. Have you ever seen it where the offensive line's been together for 2 or 3 years and how much sync they're in? And then they're a better offensive line that senior year or whatever, when you got 3 or 4 of them seniors and they've been together. And that's kind of what you need. And when you got to fill in gaps, they all kind of got to work together because you kind of got to know, kind of like the old saying, you got to know what the left hand is. The right hand needs to know what the left hand's doing. So each one has to know and have their assignments down and know and kind of know what the other one does and doesn't do, what the other one's probably good at and is not good at. And that makes a better offensive line. So when you get a line like Colorado put together and it's thrown together, doesn't mean they're not going to gel as time goes on, but it's hard to do it right off the bat. And will they have it done in week 2? I doubt it. I tell you what, I'm anxious to watch that first game of theirs against North Dakota State. I think that's on Thursday on week 1. So that's probably about 14 days away. That's probably 2 weeks from today. And that's a game you guys need to watch. It's going to be televised. North Dakota State's going to give them problems, and you'll be able to see this offensive line and see how well it does. And it wouldn't surprise me if North Dakota State pulled that out. Now, it is in Colorado. It's in Boulder. I just have a hard time going against Shedeur Sanders. He's the reason this team's not falling all apart. Him and Travis Hunter. Once they're gone, I want to see what Dion does without his son. He's got one of the best quarterbacks that's going to be coming out of college. So I don't expect them to have it together, but that defensive line they have is going to have it. They're going to be all over Nebraska. So if you look at the other games, if you take Last year, Michigan, we had Michigan that we got beat. Well, you replaced Michigan with Ohio State this year, so that's kind of a wash. And we still play Wisconsin. We still play Iowa. We still play Purdue that we played last year. We do get Rutgers this year, and Rutgers ain't going to be no slouch. And we get USC, and USC usually Lincoln Riley and them's got an offense, so they're going to be tested there, and that's going to be a good test. UCLA to me ain't probably going to be as good this year. So if you look at their schedule, it's not much stronger. If you could even really say it's stronger, you could probably say it is a little bit. Um, but since we get Northern Iowa and what we play last year, Louisiana Tech, that's probably about a wash right there. So I would say the schedule is probably about the same as it was last year. That it, for this year's as well as last year. So because of that, I think we're going to have a pretty good defensive year, and we got to get more turnovers because I'm curious to see how they do against Ohio State. I'm curious how they do against the Trojans and USC. Them are games they got to do a lot better because Michigan scored, what was it, 49, or was it in the 50s last year? And then Colorado, like I said, put like 42 on Nebraska, and that was probably from midway or at least midway through the second quarter. And that was most of it was in the second half. I think they, if I remember right, was it 7? Maybe it was 14-0 at half, maybe 7. And that means they put most of that on in the second half. So I'm curious to see how well they're going to do because I wanted to get on here and play, like I said, devil's advocate because we're all bragging about how good the defense is, how much better it's going to be. We need to straighten out the offense. So we're always riding high on Nebraska. We usually do it this time of the year, and I want to be one to be positive. But I've been hearing a lot, and when you're down here and you hear it, and then you actually listen to one of a Husker channel or Husker show kind of talk about it, it actually makes you think and go, they're kind of right. And so you have to start thinking, okay, was Nebraska really that good last year on defense? I don't I don't think they were as good as we think they were, but I don't think they were as bad as people are trying to make them sound. So because of that, I think they will improve. They also improved, like I said, in the weight room. They got another year under their belt. They played a lot of freshmen last year, guys. So you got to look at that too. You're going to see improvement. Will it look dominating? It's going to look dominating at times. Might look dominating right off the bat with UTEP, the way Colorado's offensive line is. So there, Northern Iowa, them first 3 games, you might be thinking, wow, this is a top 5 defense. So I do expect to get that out of them. And can they win 9 or 10 games? Possible. I plan to do a game by game prediction on Friday. I'm going to do a show probably around 8 or 9 o'clock this time on Friday. Do it live. Going to go through each game, predict who I think is going to win, just like I did last year, last August. And then at the end, I'm going to give the Big Ten breakdown on how well each team in the Big Ten I feel they'll do, who should make the Big Ten championship game, and ultimately win it and represent the Big Ten in the college football playoffs. Will Nebraska get in that game? Will more than one team make the college football playoff? Probably. You could see one get knocked out just because of the championship game. So I'm going to go do that on Friday. So I just wanted to jump on right quick, kind of talk about this defense. We're getting close. We're down to about 2 weeks, and just wanted to come on and kind of play devil's advocate and see what did everybody think about this defense. Do we just feel like we're overlooking at it, or are we really thinking they're really that good, or is anyone really stepped back to see, that's true. They did give up a lot of yards at certain times. And when they did play a decent offense, they gave up yards. So That's the little things I'm looking at. They've got to get a better four-man rush. And I think with Nash and Ty coming back, they should be able to do that. I think they also need more picks or more turnovers in general. A good defense turns the ball over, gets the ball. If you look at some of the elite defenses, they know how to go get the ball. They go get the ball. And a lot of that was last year. Look at that. I know Nebraska turned the ball over a lot. And yeah, a lot of it was their fault. A lot of it was also made. So that was my take on the defense. I don't think it's going to be as bad as what people want to make it sound, but I don't know if it's going to be as great as we think it is. So until Friday, guys. I'll see you guys on Friday. Thank you for stopping by, and go Big Red.